The Clay Marble, Chapter 2b. Here's what Nia meant to say at the end of 2a. My grandmother and 3 brothers too, all dead. My husband died 4 years ago, and then my mother said. For a moment there was silence. I had heard enough of such conversation not to interrupt. First there were the greetings, then the terse tally of the dead, then the pause. Only after that, it seemed, could there be talk of other things. The girl fanned the cooking fire before dipping a twig into it. Let me help you get your fire started, she said. It's getting late, and you must be very hungry. She extended the glowing twig to my mother. Mother looked at the twig, but made no move to accept it. There's really no need, she said awkwardly. We really, we don't have any more rice to cook. I knew she wanted to say, except that she couldn't bring herself to admit it. Of course, the girl exclaimed. You don't have any firewood. How could you have gathered any? You just got here. Kindling is getting scarce, I can tell you. Most of the trees have been stripped bare. Even the roots have been dug up for firewood here. She shoved a bundle of kindling toward Mother. Use this for your fire. Mother bit her lips. No, she said almost curtly. You keep it. The girl frowned. Then her expression cleared. Grandpa says my tongue's quicker than a raging river, but my mind is as thick as mud. Using a tin cup, she scooped rice out of a gunny sack and stirred the grains into the pot already on the fire. It's a good thing I just started cooking, she said cheerfully. Won't have to start another pot. I'll just add some more water and we'll have enough for all of us. There. She looked up at me and my mother. You will join us for dinner, she said. It wasn't a question or even an invitation, but a simple statement. No, it's all right, my mother said stiffly. We're not hungry. The girl reached out and put her hand on Mother's arm. You don't understand, she said gently. It's different here. We have enough to eat. We have more than enough. Then she must have seen the tears brimming over in Mother's eyes because she turned away and started to stir the rice vigorously. Before long, the girl had Mother peeling a clove of garlic and crushing dried red peppers. I could tell that my mother was enjoying cooking again, now that there was seasoning and even some salted dried fish to work with. Next, the girl turned her attention to me. I'm going to bathe while the rice is cooking, she said. Want to come along, little sister? I hesitated. Not shy, are you? My name's Nia. What's yours? Dara. Well, come on, Dara. I got a bucket of clean well water here. We could share. There was nothing I would have liked more than to douse myself with cool water just then, but I could see no hedge, no mud brick wall, not even a line of laundry to bathe behind. Nia must have sensed my shyness because she laughed as she tugged at me. You've got to do everything out in the open here, she said cheerfully. Come on, it's easy once you get used to it. I followed Nia as she carried her pail of water to a massive beam of solid stone half sunken in the fields. My grandfather says that it might have been the crossbeam over the gateway of an ancient temple during the Angkor Empire, Nia said, pointing to the stone. If so, it'd be almost 1,000 years old. I looked at the stone beam curiously. Chiseled on it were some world markings, worn smooth with time. On one corner of it was a carving of what must have been an aspera, a dancing angel. But all that remained now was a delicate hand, its stone fingers arcing gracefully back as if in the middle of a dance. Gently I touched one fingertip and felt as if I had reached across 1,000 years. "How did it get here?" I asked. "Grandpa Kim isn't sure. Maybe it was the spoils of war taken from some famous faraway temple like Angkor, or maybe there are some small ruins nearby that nobody even knows about." Then, without even looking around, Nia hitched her sarong up to her breast and deftly stripped off her shirt. Scooping some water out of her bucket with a dipper, she splashed the water over her bare shoulders. "Come on," she called, sprinkling some on me. How wonderful cool the drops of water felt. Clumsily, I wrapped my sarong around my chest, too. Just as well. I'm still flat-chested, I thought, as I wriggled out of my shirt. Together, taking turns with the dipper, we bathed out in the open. I scooped ladle after ladle of water over myself, feeling the cold seeping through my scalp and down my shoulders. After those long, dusty days in the creaky ox cart, it felt so refreshing that I laughed out loud. And Nia laughed along with me. When we had used up all the water, we walked back toward the carts, swinging the empty pail between us. As we approached the cooking fire, Mother looked up at us and smiled. I felt as if someone had suddenly reached inside me and squeezed my heart. So strong and happy was my mother's smile, I couldn't remember when I'd last seen her smile like that. "Dinner's ready," Mother announced, pointing to a dish of salted fish stir-fried in garlic and the pot of steaming rice. "Hope I didn't make it too spicy." I started to head for the food, but felt Nia tugging at the pail. "Come on," she was saying nervously. "Let's get into some dry clothes." Only then did I notice that my brother was nearby and staring open-mouthed at us. Not at me, I realized, just at Nia. I looked at my new friend. Beads of water glistened on her bare shoulders, and her wet sarong clung to her. I felt annoyed at my brother for staring like that, but one look at him and I relented. All those years Saroon had spent digging ditches, I thought, he'd probably never seen a girl as lovely as Nia, or as wet. By the time I had changed into my dry clothes and joined my mother and brother by the cooking fire, an old man and 2 children were also sitting there. Mother edged closer to Saroon to make room for me, so that the 3 of us formed a semicircle around the flames. Nia started ladling out the rice. As she did so, she introduced the old man next to her, a tall, gruff man with thick eyebrows. "This is Bao Kim, my grandfather," she said. I nodded at him shyly. "What do you say?" Mother prompted me. "Grandpa Kim," I said obediently, and Mother nodded her approval. On her other side, Nia explained, were her 2 cousins. One was a girl about my own age, and the other was a plump baby. I barely nodded to each of them before turning my attention to the rice. Nia handed the first plateful to her grandfather, who took it without comment. She passed the next plate to my mother, who hesitated, then thanked her softly. Saroon was next.
"Mr. Cobell, I'm done."
When Nia stretched out her hands to offer him a plate, he would not take it. "Saroon, come on," I whispered. He pretended not to hear me and kept stoking the fire, sending a few sparks spinning up into the air. Torn between his hunger and his pride, Saroon couldn't seem to decide whether to accept or refuse Nia's offering. "Please eat something, brother," Nia said softly, smiling at him across the fire. "It has been a long, hard trip, and you need to keep your strength up." He looked up at her, and finally he held out his hands and accepted the plate of rice from her. My turn was next, and I almost snatched the plate from Nia. The fragrance of the long-grained rice was wonderful. Steamy and sweet and warm, it wafted up to me. I had not seen such a generous mound of white rice for a long, long time. I lifted a spoonful of rice and ate it. I thought about what a wonderful thing it is to eat rice. First, you let the smell drift up in lazy spirals, sweet and elusive. Then you look at the color of it, softer and whiter than the surrounding steam. Carefully, you put a spoonful of it in your mouth and feel each grain separate on your tongue, firm and warm. Then you taste it, the rich yet delicate sweetness of it. How different it was from that gritty red rice we'd been rationed to the last 3 years. Gruel so bland and watery that it slipped right down your throat before you could even taste it. No, this was real rice. Whole, moist grains I could chew and savor. I thought I was slowly relishing each mouthful, but before I knew it, my plate was empty. My mother had already started her second plateful, and Saroon was finishing off his third. None of my family had even bothered to try the fish and garlic sauce. We were enjoying the plain rice so much. I wondered if we were being too greedy. But Nia had noticed my empty plate and was already reaching over to ladle more rice on it. "What about you?" Mother asked, glancing at the rest of Nia's family. "Will there be enough?" "There's more than enough," Nia smiled. "That's what makes the rice taste so sweet here, don't you think?" Nobody else said anything much, and soon we were all done eating. Mother went off with Nia's young cousin to rinse off the plates at the well, while Saroon stayed by the fire to talk to Nia and her grandfather. I strolled back to our ox cart and shook out my sleeping mat. Ever since we'd set out on this trip, I had slept under the broad wooden planks of the cart, in the unfamiliar darkness of the forest. It had been comforting to have those planks as a shelter, but I hesitated now, standing with my mat between the cart wheels. Close by, the cooking fire was burning low, and a few sparks still whirled away into the night sky. Elsewhere, a boy was whittling a stick of firewood, and a baby was whimpering as its mother crooned to it. On an impulse, I decided that I wanted to sleep under the open sky. So I spread my mat alongside the cart and stretched out on it. The stars were just beginning to shine, and a cool evening breeze stirred the still air. In the distance, I heard a mother singing a lullaby. It had a familiar melody, one that I could remember my mother singing to me long ago. The pulsing hum of night sounds of crickets and cicadas settled over me like a light blanket. As I shut my eyes, I took a deep breath. I had the strange feeling that somehow I had finally come back home.